things can still happen. And when we go into this, I'm just going to let you guys know right now. So this has been billed as the biggest WrestleMania ever, right? Which immediately puts it in the pantheon of talking about with all the other previous versions of it, right? I understand Vince McMahon is gone, and now Rock's on the board, and Nick Khan and Triple H being in charge of creative, and all these different things that are going on, right? But they themselves have billed this as the biggest WrestleMania ever, right? It's WrestleMania XL, extra large. We're doing everything, right? The Rock's back. Cody Roman finishing the story, Sammy Gunther, Rhea the Man, Mommy versus the Man, all these things. Brother versus brother on the Usos, is it the end of the bloodline? Is it continuing? All these different storylines they've had. Another Dominic Ray, all this stuff. Father versus son, brother versus brother, Mommy versus man, underdog Cody versus, all-time Pantheon champion Roman, right? So, and then bring back The Rock and then having Seth involved and all these different things, right? So keep in mind as we talk about this, I've been watching wrestling and participating, right, for my entire life, right, since the beginning. I've also been a writer in wrestling context for e-fetting and other things for basically my entire life, right? Doing graphics, doing other things like the ones you see here. I'm just trying to do anything that I can. I love it. I always try to embrace it. What's going on in the indies right now is amazing. And if you haven't checked it out, my buddy Chris Page does podcasting on his own channel, and I would check that out. I think it's CCP Podcasting or CPPE Podcasting. I forget. I think he changed it at one point. But anyway, he talks wrestling. He does live shows. He'll tell you all about the indies. He has a lot of those guys on now where he does interviews. So go check that stuff out. It's fantastic. And he puts a lot of time and effort into that. He's also, got a really good e-fed called WGWF. So if you like e-fetting, which is a writing version of wrestling, I would go check that out. It's a competition writing based, parameters as far as instead of being physical in the ring, it's all based on that. And then they produce results that are in the ring based on who won the writing competition, right? So it's really fun. If you've never been in e-fetting, I would definitely recommend it. It's a lot of fun. It's a great way to be creative. You can create your own angles and your own stories and your own characters, or you can use existing ones. There's all kinds of fun ways to do that. I've always loved it, from characters I've had like Iconic Dubois and Radical Gabe Reno and all these different guys that I've had. There's a few other ones I've had, but I won't reveal who they are because people don't know, and it's kind of funny to hear people talk crap about certain ones and then have them not know that I'm other ones, and then kind of the dichotomy where on this side they're talking crap to me about myself and stuff like that. It's kind of funny on Discord or whatever, right? It's kind of hilarious to me sometimes. But anyway, one of the things I loved about WrestleMania is just the set pieces. I love what they're doing with that. I love that they're allowing Michael Cole to kind of, there's been previous times with WWE creative, whether it was Vince McMahon or whatever, where you could tell it was so orchestrated that it was almost nauseating, and of course we all know it's scripted and it is orchestrated. But to a certain extent, you want to have people have real reactions too. And in the past, some of these WrestleManias, you'll see stuff and they'll say things and you're like, what? Like that, because they're trying to make the story go in a direction as opposed to absorbing the action, stating it, and then still pushing it in that direction. And I think Michael Cole's done a better job now. You can tell that the Vince McMahon handcuffs are off and he's really kind of being more genuine about his reactions and stuff, but still pushing the story in those directions, which those things aren't mutually exclusive. Jim Ross does a great job with that and always has, where, and that's what makes Jim Ross so great, is considered one of the greatest announcers ever, is that he's so natural with his takes that it sounds natural whether he means it to be or not, or whether it is or not based on what the show requires, right? And that's what we've always appreciated, is that genuine kind of the way it comes off so genuine with JR. And I think Michael Cole's getting closer to that now, to where, now that those, WWE McMahon handcuffs are off, it's becoming a lot more genuine with Graves and with Wade Barrett and all these guys that they have. Pat McAfee helps because he kind of adds this non-wrestling component to his reactions, where he's kind of giving you what the fans are thinking, which I think is good and genuine and awesome, where he still does it, but then it's at times he goes a little over the top. You can tell he's kind of trying to, I didn't mean to, mess with the story or whatever, it's like he needs to dial that back a little, but I think he overall does a great job. Pat's a really good guy, obviously former pro football player, so he knows, the athletes and all this stuff and how hard it is at the highest level, so fantastic stuff. Let's get into actual night one, right? So I watched night one. Peacock is where it was, and I think you can rewatch it. I don't know if it's available yet. They probably wait for night 2 to be over, and I think a couple days go by or something. I'm sure you could still catch certain matches on YouTube or other places. I don't know how legit or non-legit those places are, but there may be streamers online that have it already and stuff. So let's talk a little bit about it. So it opened up with a revelation that Becky Lynch had been dealing with. I think they said it was strep throat, and so they said, she's been really having a rough time. Even in the build to this match and the interviews that Becky was doing, she was very emotional anytime she would do an interview about pretty much anything. And I think that you could tell that same kind of ferocity that she has when she knows she's going to win wasn't there. And I think we all kind of realized going in that she probably wasn't going to win versus Rhea. They're trying really hard to build Rhea into kind of a female Roman where she's really, got this huge push and really building kind of a female dynasty version of kind of what he is with Bloodline with Judgment Day. And I think that's why a lot of Judgment Day kind of originally started as an Edge faction, and then it kind of went into, it's Priest and Finn Balor, which I think is a waste of Finn Balor, to be honest with you, to even have him in there. I think he's so much better on his own with the Demon and all that, and it's kind of all getting lost in this Judgment Day shuffle. But I understand why they're doing it. It added credibility, and then when Edge left, they kind of needed Balor to keep it there. Then they gave Priest a briefcase, and then it ended up being that Mommy and Dom, outshine both of those guys because of the stories that they were doing. And they've really built Dom up, and they're still going with the Dom Ray, kind of dynamic just because it works. And I think it puts them both in a place to be used. And I think that's kind of where they're going with that. Plus now with Escobar and Andrade coming back and stuff, it gives them a way for some of these guys to shine, to continue to kind of do that, LWO and father-son and all this. And I like those dynamics. Getting back to the opening match, which was Rhea versus Becky, it wasn't a bad match. My issue with WrestleMania sometimes is, look, you are building it to be the biggest WrestleMania ever, right? We're not building it that way. You're building it that way. So the main event on WrestleMania and title matches particularly should not look like an average SmackDown match. And to me, that's what this match looked like. It looked like an average SmackDown main event. If you were going the third SmackDown in, July, and you had a main event that was the same match, that's what it would look like. You know what I mean? And I understand Becky was sick, and there was other contributing factors to why it wasn't amazing and over the top. But I think if they want to continue to build the women's division stuff, these matches have to be, fantastic. And I think it was okay. It was good. It was all right. It was cool. But it wasn't, wow, what a match, And I think that especially to open WrestleMania, I know there's 2 nights now, and you can argue what's actually opening WrestleMania, but I just mean as the very first actual physical match, I don't think that it was overwhelming. I don't think it was amazing, and I think it was pretty predictable. I think even going into it with the build that I don't think Becky's good at hiding her emotions, and I think you could tell that this was going to be it. And I know that we all kind of know where it's going anyway, but some of these guys are better than others. You even see The Rock in interviews where he blatantly reveals something, but then still will play it up to his character, right? I think of course, The Rock's a high standard, right? He's really good at entertaining, and he knows how to kind of dial it any which way he wants at any given time. And I think Becky's still learning a lot of that. I think she was good at that particular man thing that she was doing, and I know that she still goes by that name. But I think she needs a swerve in a way. And I think her and Seth both, to me, their characters, I don't know if it's just, I don't know what it is, but they both, I know they're married, obviously, but they both have this weird character thing going on where I don't understand where they are in their character. Like, their talent is there, but their characters just don't really make sense to me at the moment. Like, where are they going? What direction are they trying to do with all of this, visionary, and then the man kind of not being the man? And like there's all this kind of weird stuff going on with those two that I don't really understand. Maybe they're just not completely focused on character as opposed to in-ring work or whatever it is. Maybe they're focused on different things, and that's fine. Maybe it'll play out and make itself apparent, because there's not always going to be a peak. There's peaks and valleys, which is what makes all the peaks so good in wrestling. So maybe they don't always have those same, ability to, be on the top of their game every single moment in time. And obviously, in order for other people to succeed, some people have to go down, and so on as far as the stories go. And obviously, Seth and Becky have both had their moments on top. So maybe it's their turn to kind of be in the valley, right? So someone else can peak. I think that's important. But I didn't really like for the most part, the whole Becky man thing. I think it could have been a lot better, and I think they just kind of were like, I don't know if Becky was just not into it because she just doesn't like Rhea or whatever it was, but there's something going on there where it just didn't get over the way that it should have. Like, it got over, but it didn't get over the way that it could have with those two in that match. I'll be interested to see when Charlotte comes back how she's going to figure into all that, because I think she would elevate those two again and kind of go back out just because of her raw talent and ability to entertain while she's doing it. Being a Flair helps, I'm sure. So I think that will be a nice ingredient for them to add back in and kind of blend those things and then kind of figure out what exactly they're going to do there. But I mean, not to say that WWE, they've got an amazing women's division. I think there's other really good people in the indies that are coming up. Obviously, you see that in Riot City, and you see that in some of these other places that have great talent that's coming through. AEW has really good women's talent, but I'm not sure they know what to do with it, which is kind of an issue. And I think that's why you see Jade Cargill in WWE, is because she sees that too and was like, I don't have 10 years for them to figure out what to do with me. I would rather go somewhere now while I'm already in my 30s and have it figured out from a place that knows how to develop and help my career, because of the track record of people like Becky and Sasha and all these people that were born into those stories. Sasha's big because she was the boss in WWE, and now she's still kind of that character as a CEO, but it's kind of like that build was really weird and they didn't really do a good job. AEW's got all this weird stuff going on, that they have all these good talents and characters and stuff, but they just don't blend them in a way that makes a lot of sense. They're lucky because Edge knows how to do that of himself, but to have the whole roster and elevate an entire roster is a lot to ask of a guy who's really on the tail end of his career. And Christian's been doing great work, and those guys working together has been great, but at some point they have to figure out a way to kind of elevate the rest of this. I know Omega's been out and all this, but AEW's just got to get it together. So anyway, going back to the match, I think it could have been a little bit better. It's not to say it wasn't good, and I'm glad Rhea got a victory over Becky and it helps her and all that kind of stuff, but I just didn't think it was the best match that those two probably could have had, and maybe that's because Becky, was sick, so hey, more power to you. Maybe we'll see it again sometime down the road when she's feeling better. The 6-pack ladder match was interesting. The mere fact that they introduced that both sets of belts would be at the top and that the match went in until both are pulled down pretty much told you that they were separating them. Just the mere fact that was a stipulation at all, because why would you do that unless you were separating them, and there's no other way to separate them other than to do that, especially at WrestleMania. So Judgment Day's had a good run, but I think that Priest still has a briefcase that so far we haven't seen him do anything with. Maybe tonight with 2 title matches and night 2 of WrestleMania, they'll figure out a different way to do that. I think that when they gave him that briefcase, they almost instantly regretted it, because now something has to happen with it, and I don't know that anything good can really happen, because even if they put him over like an injured, like say Seth somehow ekes out a win over Drew tonight or something, and then he comes out and cashes in on an injured knee Seth or something, is that even really going to help Damian Priest in his career? Probably not, because it's like, oh, well, that's what you needed to happen in order to take advantage. Even though the nature of a briefcase is to take advantage of a situation, the opportunists like Edge and all these guys that have done that. But I don't think that's ultimately a good thing for Damian Priest in his career. I think it shows that he needs that, because right now he's not over in a way, he's kind of the least, JD McDonough's getting more shine than him right now in his own group, and it's kind of crazy. So I don't really understand that. Obviously, Finn can stand on his own 2 feet. He was the first Universal Champion, and then he got injured because of Seth, and I would love to see them go back through that again, but obviously now Seth may need to be out for a little while to recover or something. We'll see what happens there. Although they need Seth, if Roman and Rock are not going to be around after WrestleMania for whatever reason, they might need Seth to step back in and do some things pretty quickly, but we'll see where his knee is at. But with guys like Drew now up there and Cody obviously going to be carrying the torch moving forward, it seems like, unless something crazy happens tonight. I would love it if he lost, because people would hate it, and it would really help the storyline. But I don't see how they could make that work. Why would they have even done this pivot with Rock going to Final Boss and all that if Cody wasn't going to win? I mean, what would be the point? But I would love to see him lose, because people would fucking hate it. They would hate it. I would love it, because it would be old school WWE move to have him lose that match. I don't like that it's so predictable. So him losing to me would help that and go, oh, okay. So when they build things up, it may not be what you think, right? But Cody lost last year, so I don't think there's any chance that they're going to do that, because it would really relegate him to where you wouldn't believe anything that he says anymore, because all these things would no longer be true that he's been saying leading up to this. Although you can argue they're already not true, because he keeps talking about how he's going to mess up The Rock and so forth. That's never happened. But tonight will probably change. Tonight, I think, though, there will be, with the bloodline rules and stuff that they introduced, obviously they were going to win the tag team match, because otherwise those bloodline rules wouldn't be involved. And the natural tendency in your head from a storyline perspective is to assume bloodline rules means advantage bloodline, right? And they're going to go back on that, and the bloodline will come out and reveal, like, oh, well, Cody's going to get the advantage, and then you're going to think Cody's going to win, and then the bloodline's going to do something messed up where they all, rush in or do something to cheat, and then Cody will have countered that to checkmate them somehow with either Austin and The Rock, like you saw in the truck that was clearly lit. That was not a coincidence. That truck was professionally lit. During that promo where The Rock was beating the crap out of Cody Rhodes on the loading dock, that was a professionally lit job on the Cena Austin truck. There is no chance that was a coincidence. None. And actually, I've actually seen pictures online that may not be true, but it's fun to think about, where Brock Lesnar was on a different truck over to the side, but that one wasn't lit, so maybe that one was a coincidence, right? Who knows? The truth is if it's on screen, you can assume it's not a coincidence. Like, people always go, oh, well, this guy walked into the background by accident. Nope, not happening. That is not going to happen. People don't just walk by a live shot for a multi-billion-dollar company by accident, right? These are controlled sets and environments. They're not just going to have some random person over there walk by, unless it's in the far, far, far distance and they're outside. That's not going to happen. So you can pretty much forget about that. The tag match was interesting because you had all these different dynamics going on. Obviously, the Austin Theory, Grayson Waller thing, they want to continue to go with, and so they end up picking up the SmackDown titles. And then the Raw titles was interesting because you weren't really sure. They kind of pivoted to, oh, is it going to be the New Day, or who's going to end up winning those tag titles? They had some interesting spots where they kept setting things up, and you're like, well, somebody's going through that table and somebody's going through those tables. The McDonough one I didn't really like because he purposely stayed on the ladder for so long that you're like, well, clearly it'll be him because he's just standing there waiting for somebody to come over and push him over. Like, I don't really like stuff like that because timing is everything in wrestling, right? And that's what makes it so difficult. The timing is almost as hard as the physical stuff that they're doing, because the timing is what makes or breaks the match, because if the timing's off, it just doesn't go over, right? And I think that's one of the problems that they had with that match, is there was a little bit of off timing. They tried some high spots and stuff, but once again, when you yourself are saying this is going to be the biggest WrestleMania ever, and they said, oh, like, even The Rock, oh, this is going to be the greatest tag match ever. There are a lot of other factors to that that go into. Sorry, my phone's ringing here. But there's a lot of timing things that go into that, where you have to be in the right place at the right time, and you have to be able to make that happen. Well, if you look at the other tag matches that have happened previous WrestleManias, like the TLCs and ladder matches, specifically between the Hardys, Edge and Christian, the Dudleys, and all these other teams that have been so great, they didn't really do a good job of topping any of those, right? So immediately, again, with this WrestleMania XL, it's the biggest ever. Like, I understand that not every single match is going to deliver, but so far, as I'm watching this, I'm like, okay, so the Rhea-Becky match is not one of the best matches I've ever seen or anything like that. It's okay. It's like SmackDown quality. It's good. It's okay. Okay, Becky's sick. Okay, whatever. Now you have this tag match where it was entertaining, but best ever, you know what I mean? So that's not really good either. So anything there is not particularly great. They do end up giving a kind of a sentimental victory to R-Truth and Miz, because they had been a tag team before, obviously, and then now they're back. And, they wanted to give R-Truth that moment because fans clamored for it, and they're trying really hard to listen to the fans more, which is the same reason that they pivoted from Rock Roman to back to Cody Roman and all these kind of things. So I think there's a lot of good things that they're doing, and I like seeing R-Truth kind of get that moment, and obviously it meant a lot to him. He's in his 50s and probably doesn't have a whole lot of time left to get that moment. So that was awesome, and to see, obviously, Miz has been tag champion with many different people and different variations, from John Morrison to I think Chris Jericho and a bunch of other people that he's tagged with over time. So fantastic. fantastic sentimental victory, but definitely not one of the greatest tag matches I've ever seen, right? I mean, no, it's good. It's entertaining, don't get me wrong, but they're the ones billing it as the greatest WrestleMania of all time, right? They're doing that. I'm not doing that and saying that I have to deliver on it. They're doing that and saying they have to deliver. So that brings us to the Andrade and Rey Mysterio versus Santos Escobar and Dominic Mysterio. Obviously, they kind of build this as a good way to kind of launch Andrade back into the mainstream, which is why it was kind of a surprise, and then a last second thing, and then obviously launching him potentially into a Santos Escobar feud or whatever the case may be was also really cool. The LWO thing. Obviously, Rey and Andrade kind of had to win for this to go over the way they wanted. And when you're a heel, losing doesn't really hurt you. Like, you know, Escobar and Dom, like, losing doesn't really hurt them because you hate them anyway. So what difference does it make? So I really like the fact that they put Andrade over and let them kind of win the match. The match was entertaining. It was okay. It wasn't anything spectacular. So once again, they're saying that it's going to be the best WrestleMania ever. And so far, you now have 3 matches in a row that are kind of like, okay, whatever. Like, they're cool. You know, it's cool. Whatever. So that's kind of it. And the one thing it was doing, though, is it was actually building to. It made me keep thinking about the main event. I'm like, they must be doing something crazy in these main events for it to be billed that way and know that these matches are not, you know, greatest of all time caliber on the undercard. At least not yet. We'll see. You know, maybe they'll have a great undercard night 2, and that's what they were waiting for to deliver, and that's really the main. I mean, it is on Sunday, which is typically when the pay-per-view, you know, best matches are, but most pay-per-views don't have 2 nights, so it's kind of hard to decipher those things, right? The Jimmy J thing was interesting. I'm sure that more of this will be revealed tonight. You know, Jay did defeat Jimmy, but Jimmy kind of used the emotion to betray him and la 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 la, and they kind of went off that. And it's interesting to see that, you know, the rest of the bloodline wasn't super involved. A little bit, but not super involved. You know, Solo, not really. Obviously, on SmackDown, he was involved, but then they kind of left it alone, which leads you to believe that Solo is going to be involved tonight because otherwise he wouldn't be involved at all. So that, I'm sure, will come to fruition in some way, shape, or form. Maybe the Usos will all kind of form their own pact and go away from Roman if he loses tonight. Or like they kind of alluded to last night when Roman accidentally speared The Rock, they're kind of alluding to the fact that the bloodline may have some problems. They're already kind of going, hey, you never know, you know, kind of thing going on. But they could also dial that back if Cody loses and go, oh, well, that was nothing, you know. So Cody's not going to lose. There's no way. I would love it if they did that, but there's no way it's going to happen. I can't imagine that they're going to do that after this crazy build. Damage Control versus Jade, Naomi, and Bianca. I like this match a lot. Once again, not one of the greatest matches I've ever seen or anything, but I liked it from a standpoint of there was a lot built into this with Damage Control, and it was kind of interesting because they kind of had more issues directly with Bayley and the way that she was doing things, and obviously that other title match that's about to take place. But Damage Control versus Bianca, Naomi, and Jade, I thought was a really good way to kind of get Jade in and over with some other really great performers. And I love the whole the ethnicity kind of back and forth thing that they had going on there that really allowed both teams to shine and really kind of be like a power, you know, type movement for both. And I thought that was really good. I love Jade, and I think she's going to be an absolute superstar. I would love to see like Jade versus Charlotte or Jade versus Mommy, or, you know, I think there's so many different ways that they could go with Jade. I think she's fantastic. I thought when the first time I saw her in AEW, I was like, wow, she's great. Why don't they use her better? I remember that the first time I saw her, I was like, wow, I hope they do something with her, and they just kind of never did. You know, she had some interesting moments, but nothing that was really great. And I hope that I know WWE sees it, and that's why they have her, and that's why they're gonna continue to put her in places to succeed. I think it's similar with like Britt Baker. I think if Britt Baker came to WWE, it would be a whole different ballgame for her. But she's kind of the top dog in AAA, you know, and so it's kind of like, why would she want to, you know, because she may not be the top dog in WWE for a while, if at all, ever. So she would have to kind of decide if that's worth it for her to do that, right? And obviously she has some other connections with who she's married to and all that in AEW too. So We'll see, but you never know. I mean, Naomi, is married to somebody in WWE, and she went off to TNA and all that kind of stuff too. So you never know how things can play out. But I really like the Jade Bianca Naomi dynamic, and I hope that they either keep that going or it propels Jade to that next level. Obviously, Bianca has been there, and they did a really good job building her as the EST and all of that. So I want to see Jade. Her entrances are kind of interesting. Something seems just a little bit off about it, though. Like, I don't know if it's the music just not being dramatic enough or something, but like it doesn't quite sync up with the visual. So if I were them, I might take another look at that and kind of be like, hey, what's going on there? Because there's something about that like it's good, but it's just like, what's the it's almost like the music either needs to be more dramatic or the visuals need to be a little bit less, with the lighting and all that. I think they're close though. It's good. It's just you kind of look at it and go, well, wait a minute. Shouldn't the music be a little bit better, or the lights be a little bit dimmer? I don't know. There's something going on there that just doesn't seem like it syncs up exactly right. But it's still really good, and that's not nitpicking. I really like this match a lot. It was probably one of the matches I like the most so far that we talked about on the card. The Jimmy J thing to me, like those guys just don't really do that much. Like they kick each other and run around, and they just don't really do much else other than that. It's like, okay, and there's a little bit of drama there just because of the build with Bloodline and all that, but it's just not fantastic stuff with Jimmy and Jay. I just, and people are, oh, like Brett Owen. Yeah, but Brett Owen can wrestle. Brett and Owen are two of the best wrestlers in the history of the business, right? These two guys don't even look like they really know how to wrestle. They know how to kick. Okay, cool. Like, it's just, and I know some of that's like, oh, old timey, and, you have ridiculous standards and blah, blah, blah. I get it. And maybe that's true. I don't know. But it's just kind of annoying to me when I see an entire match where two guys don't really do anything. Anyway, and it's built so dramatically as being the best WrestleMania ever. It's just kind of like, okay, so prove it. How is it the best WrestleMania ever? At least try to do something crazy. And they didn't really do that in that match. Gunther Sammy was interesting. You kind of knew what was going to happen here. I mean, as much as like Gunther has done a lot for the title, with so many guys, it sounds like kind of bowing out for either injury or other reasons after WrestleMania. Rock, Roman, Seth, others probably bowing out after WrestleMania because of either injury or time off or movies like The Rock or whatever it is. They need another guy to step into the world title picture, and that guy's going to be Gunther. And for that to happen, he needs to drop the Intercontinental title. So it helps Sammy as well to do that. The match was believable. Although Sammy beating Gunther in general is kind of not believable, but because he's one of these guys like the Usos where he's got 4 moves, and you're just kind of like, okay, he's got a lot of heart, he's got a lot of passion, but a guy like Gunther, I hope that they do a lot more with him in the world title ranks because he's got so much potential and he does so many different things, and I love that about him. He's so dynamic, and that's what a lot of these guys aren't, and that's what kind of annoys me about somebody like Sammy beating Gunther is that I understand why they do it and they have to do it. And I'm glad for Sammy that they did it. It'll help him in his career and being Intercontinental Champion. I hope that they keep a long reign going because long reigns build title credibility, and it's a good thing, whether it was Roman or the women's titles they have right now or the Intercontinental. And I think that that's something Triple H intimately understands as a former wrestler who's been in the business. And sometimes when you're a guy like Vince McMahon, where Vince McMahon's wrestled and he understands the business, but when you start switching titles around constantly, they don't mean anything. It's like, oh, well, that guy will have it next week, so what difference does it make? When a guy has a title for over a year, it builds the credibility, and it's really important. And I think that that's what Gunther established, and he should be credited for that. I think they should change the Intercontinental title either back to the way it was or come up with some new design that looks a lot better than the one that they have right now. But in saying that, it's still the Intercontinental title. Sammy still beat him, and it took pretty much everything he had, and a hoover kick, and then a brain buster, and all this different stuff. But they did build it because Gunther did dominate him early in that match, and so they did build it the right way. I feel like that match could have been a little bit longer to build a little bit more of the drama of it, but it was not bad, and I think that was one of those. That one and the damage control match I really liked. As opposed to some of the other matches were just not great that we've talked about. And it's not that they're not good, they're good. Some of them even very good. You could argue that Rhea and Becky was very good, right? But not great, and certainly not greatest of all time, which is what they are billing this WrestleMania as, right? So we'll see. I really want to see the Logan Paul, Kevin Owens match, Randy Orton match. Okay, let's talk about the tag match real quick as well. So when we get to the main event of night one, the Rock's entrance was amazing, by the way. I love all the final boss stuff they did with the graphics and all that. It was really cool. And I think Rock even released on his social media another like little video game graphic thing that was really fun to look at. This tag match I really liked for a lot of reasons. All the stuff that they built in, the layers they built into all these promos leading in with the Rock and the belt and all that kind of stuff, like the weight belt and the all that kind of stuff. They built all that in, and then it was used in the match, right? And so that was, and it wasn't in a way that was super predictable. Like first he brings it in, and you're like, oh, okay, here we go. But then he doesn't use it. The ref throws it out, and when he throws it out, you're like, I wonder why he threw it to that side, right? And now you find out that it's because that's where the Rock was, right? Because that's where he was standing on the apron. But then for the kind of latter part of the match, he's not on the apron. Roman's in there kind of fighting the other two off, and the Rock's over there kind of on the side, not really on the apron anymore. And then he eventually gets the belt, and then timing wise, the Rock is amazing. That whole match, The Rock's timing was just, it was amazing that he hasn't wrestled in this long because his timing was great. For all the spots they did, his timing was perfect. He had better timing in that match than Cody at some certain points, right? So it was kind of interesting and amazing to me. The way that they did that, but they executed it for the most part really well. Even from the Paul Heyman part, where he's like, no, no, and all that. And then, so it was a really interesting match. I love that they went outside, did the barrier, did the table, the Rock bottom through the table, but then Seth takes it through the barrier, and Seth taking it through the barrier basically stops him from being able to come in and help Cody in that match. And so then the bloodline rules, and then the Rock gets his moment where he gets to do a rock bottom and then the people's elbow and stuff. If you haven't seen it, then you probably shouldn't be watching this in the first place, so it's not a spoiler. If you haven't seen it, then I don't know why you're watching this in the first place, right? So spoilers, yes, spoilers. By the way, please like and subscribe, guys. I really appreciate that. It's actually on the bottom of the screen, even though I ask on the top. It's actually on the bottom, obviously, especially if you're on YouTube. It really helps me out. So amazing night one stuff, especially the final main event. The main event set the table for whatever will happen tomorrow. And tomorrow you've got really good potential for matches. You've got another women's match that's going to be really good between Bayley and Sane. You've got all this different stuff that's going on there. You've got the match, the U.S. title match, which is going to be interesting to see how Logan Paul does against Randy Orton and Kevin Owens, who obviously are two guys who aren't going to let that match not be good because those two guys are not going to be there in a WrestleMania match and not understand what it's all about. So I think that's fantastic. The Drew-Seth match is really interesting now because they kind of alluded to Seth being hurt and, will Drew take advantage? I think Drew will take advantage and win that match because I think they have to do that because then you have Drew as a heel with a title. And I think that title on Seth right now with the visionary thing is not really helping. I like Seth as a guy and as a performer, but I just hate his gimmick. I hope that he goes away for a little while and comes back as something else. Like, I like the architect and all that. I don't know what this visionary thing is supposed to be accomplishing for him. It just doesn't really do anything for him. I know he's trying to be a face, and maybe this is just his version of a face, but it's really not a likable face. Every single guy in a promo talks about how ridiculous it is, which shows you that in a real way, those wrestlers immediately go to that, right, in promos. I just don't really like the visionary thing. I like Seth. I just don't like his current gimmick. It's kind of weird. It's just like dial it back a little bit. What he was wearing when he came out last night was just like, what? What are you doing? Like, it's just kind of strange. Like, he does strange things just to be strange, and that's not good. Like, it's not good just to do that to do that. It should serve a purpose, right? It doesn't seem like it really does. So it's kind of annoying, in a way when you look at a guy that's as talented as Seth and then go, well, what are we doing here? So I would like to see Drew beat him, just from and they've been building Drew in a great way for a while, and I think that it's Drew's time now to really kind of step into that villain role, especially if Roman is stepping away and losing this match. If Roman's not, then you could argue that maybe Drew should lose. So you kind of want to have a heel-face dynamic going on, and so if it's Cody as the face and champion, then Drew as a heel and champion would make a lot of sense in a lot of different ways, and it would give Seth something to chase when he comes back or whatever, or if maybe he doesn't leave and he actually stays. Who knows? And then the U.S. title match, I think Logan Paul will probably win because I don't really see what the U.S. title does for Kevin Owens or Randy Orton. I think this match is to kind of propel Logan by putting him with those two guys, but we'll see. Maybe I'm wrong and Randy will get another U.S. title reign, or they'll try to build Kevin back up a little bit. Obviously, those guys at any time can step into the world title ranks, and I think Randy will probably after, like we said, some of these guys leaving. So you have Gunther now probably going up to the next level. A guy like Randy and AJ are always kind of sitting there, and then they've got LA Knight if they want to put him in there, or they've got Owens if they ever need him to kind of pop up and be in some of those matches and put other guys over, or whatever the case may be. So I think that's interesting. We'll see. The Rock alluded in his press conference to the fact that this may not be it. So I think tomorrow there's going to be some kind of betrayal between the Bloodline. I think they'll kind of break up, and then I think the Rock and Roman may face at SummerSlam or down the road, or maybe they'll build to the next WrestleMania slowly or something. We'll see. We'll see how it goes, but I think ultimately the Rock and Roman will happen at some point. So the only way for that to happen is for there to be some kind of bloodline thing going on. Maybe it'll happen now, maybe it won't happen for a while, so they can build it back up again and do next year. And then Cody will have his story, and be the champion either by then or for some foreseeable future at this point. There's a lot of other great matches going on tomorrow on the card as well. But I think night one overall, as we're talking about night one, obviously kind of a review of night one, I think the main event saved night one. I think night one was going to be really a very average, not very good WrestleMania card until the main event. Because the main event was so entertaining, had so many interesting spots in it, and kind of had this nice kind of teeter-totter ebb and flow to where you thought either side could win. And it was legit. It wasn't like, oh, bullshit. Like, it was like, oh, wow, like, that's interesting. Oh, whoa, that's interesting, too. Oh, wait, well, look at that. They kind of tied that back in. So I think they did a great job, and that's because you had a lot of veterans and the best guys on the card in that match, and they really did a great job of executing it. The other matches, there were a couple good matches on night one, but none of them were great all-time matches until you got to the main event. And the main event was a really interesting, different dynamic match, and that's what made it so good. But we'll see what happens on night two. Maybe once you put all the pieces together from both nights, it'll end up being the greatest WrestleMania ever. But they really need to deliver tonight for that to happen. They really need to hit tonight. Because last night, you could argue that there was only really one great match, and that was the main event. And the other matches were just like, all right, for the most part. A couple of them were pretty good, but most of them were like, So maybe that's just high standards. I don't know. Leave your thoughts, comments, concerns, guys. Obviously, we're going to see what happens tonight. Tonight, night 2, WrestleMania 40 in Philly. So we'll see what they do and how it goes. But so far, so good. Wrestling's in a great place. And I don't mean to talk down about it, but just being honest with my thoughts on the matches, the spots, obviously from the build and the promotion of it being the greatest WrestleMania ever. I think that, that asks for a high standard, and they should deliver that standard if that's the case, right? So we'll see what they do tonight, and the main event was a great start last night, and we'll see how it continues to push forward. All right, guys.